Yeah, and this measurement is a result of an incident in 2012 when the club liner was beaten to death after a youth game in Holland.
Jesus.
And that's when we had some severe measurements to tighten down on these sorts of incidents. And one of them was to make sure that everyone on the pitch was registered so they could be addressed. And 6 players who were part of that game have been banned for life. So if you try and get a player card for them, then there's no chance. So they won't be able to play league football again for the rest of their lives. But as Martin and Anthony as well have experienced in the Easter Open, the players aren't used to where you do those sort of things. And I've seen English referees adjust very quickly, and they also got the cards out very quickly. And they said afterwards that they liked the way that was handled by us.
I remember. Sorry, guys. I remember watching the egg referee, and I think there was a German guy there as well, referees. And what he did exactly what you just said. Only if there was a few people in an area, he'd point at the player and go, "You, yellow card." And I loved that. I thought, stop all that nonsense, because sometimes, for instance, if you book someone for, say, time wasted, and then we call him over, we take his name, we ask him not to do it again, we then show the yellow cards, and then we tell him to go back into it. We've played into their hands.
I know, exactly. Exactly.
And what players are moan about? They won't moan. And any players who we get on here, and hopefully some will listen, particularly with the Self boys, we'll ask them this, because time wasting doesn't piss off players. It's tempo changing pisses off players. If you're on top of the game and you're chasing the last 5 minutes and you're going, oh, that's when you see the time wasting. It's the tempo. They want to keep the tempo up, they're chasing, they want to get a goal back, It's that sort of initiative that when we take our time booking a player, in those sort of times, the last 15 minutes or just before half time, that you'll see these sort of tactics come into play. And we need to recognise that as referees.
Yeah, well, what I was going to ask you was, with the situation around these identification cards, do you think that, because it is a problem, absolutely, that we have here, do you think it actually prevents unregistered players from playing ultimately? Because if you read out a name, they might forget that it's their name, that it's supposed to be their name. Do you know what I mean? So it must make it more difficult to have unregistered players.
I think it works for about 80% of our games because, as I said, what you see in Holland, and again, that's the difference from yours. Western-super-Mare, how many teams have they got, Mark?
Well, the actual club or?
Yeah, the club. How many adult teams?
Oh, the Western-super-Mare's probably only got 2, maybe. They stick on the Southern League. They are in the Southern League now, but they used to be Conference South or National League South.
So they got one reserve team.
Yeah.
Whereas in Holland, clubs like that who play in the what you would be saying conference have 12-man teams. So if you got the 12th team is playing the 11th team of the neighbour, then a club referee will do that game. Now he's not going to bother at 9 a.m. to check the passes because half the players are outside smoking or smelling a beer. And they won't show up for the pass control. So at the lowest of lowest leagues, where it is actually most important because that's where most of our escalations are at those games. Unfortunately, referees do not take the responsibility to check these cards. Whereas as soon as there's neutral officials, we are obliged to do it. And luckily, I think 95% will do.
It sounds like an amazing system. I'd love for something like that to be brought in for us to use. But if that happened, Sunday League across Great Britain would fold within 2 weeks, because the amount of players that would be like, oh yeah, I'm Joe Smith, and then you look at his ID card and it's like just completely not him. You'd have to then get referees that would be complicit in like, well, fuck it. If I don't say that that's him, they won't play the game.
Yeah.
And then, a team of 10, 15 people, it's not going to be 15 people, but Sunday League, you're lucky if you get 11 people turn up to do the game. And as much as I would love to see that come in maybe for a certain level in England and maybe the wider UK, like we've alluded to, the amount of unregistered players or players who are claiming to be other people.
Ringers.
Yeah. Well, like they've come down from the senior team to make sure that the reserves get out the relegation zone or, something like that.
Yeah.
It definitely happens. And as referees, it's not our place in the UK to say, I recognise you don't play for this team. You just referee the 11 people from each team that are on that pitch. And you let the clubs like report each other for that sort of thing.
And I think that to be honest, the way I think about our system, I don't think it would take a wide scale change to implement the compulsory numbers thing. Because to be honest, my personal opinion is that should be, if you're a club that cares about what you're doing, you should have numbers on all your kits anyway. But I think that the whole the identity cards thing, again, I think that's a great thing. But I don't even think we need to go that far. I think as long as we made team sheets compulsory, it then gives you an opportunity to write the player's name down already, and then you can just tick and card, and you've saved time.
Yeah, that is something we do over here. Yeah, we'll put the number and the name of the player down, and then you just tick and cross-reference it that way when he says his name. But I think going back to the ID cards, I think it's, again, another double-edged sword. I think it'd be good to help us, and some teams who don't play ringers will be upset, and some that have got a lot of players will be fine with it. But both will say, who's going to pay for it? It's another cost. It costs so much money to put on a game of football, with, pitch fees, kits, referees fees. Who in Holland pays for those passes, mate?
You as a club make sure that you get the names and the recent photo. Send that in to the FA. They will send the cards.
So the FA pay for the pass. You've got to pay for the
yes.
Oh, well, clubs will be a bit better with that, I think.
Yeah, and this measurement is a result of an incident in 2012 when the club liner was beaten to death after a youth game in Holland.
Jesus.
And that's when we had some severe measurements to tighten down on these sorts of incidents. And one of them was to make sure that everyone on the pitch was registered so they could be addressed. And 6 players who were part of that game have been banned for life. So if you try and get a player card for them, then there's no chance. So they won't be able to play league football again for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I remember that case, Jürgen, and one of our first blogs, me, Auntie, and Nathan talking about, we talked about body cameras, whether we think, body cameras are useful. We've talked about more severe punishments. I don't know, where Nate sits on this, but I can't remember. Over here, mate, we had a sine die, they called it. Sine die, which is Latin, but I think it means no length of time in Latin. So if you got a sine die ban, that was it. You couldn't play again. Now, right, coming through all my football days, oh my God, he's been done sine die. It's very rare I seem to hear anyone who gets done in a ref or for sine die. It's 5 years, and we had to talk about this. And Ant said something which I thought was quite thoughtful and made me think: would it take something like that, what happens in Holland, to have drastic changes like ID cards? And really, if that, I've said this before, and I say it again, it's almost as if I've got a prepared statement already. But when someone gets severely beaten or killed refereeing, it's already made. It's already made. And I'll be saying to people, there's going to be people that need to take responsibility, who had chances to make our game safer. On certain incidents, what happened to Fernando Lopez in London, the viral video with 2 million views. All these channels where they said, let's do something a bit more than... I will be going back and referencing this and saying, here's the chances you had to make our game safer. And I just really hope I don't ever make that appearance. I really do.
What I'll do at this point as well, because not everyone that watches this will be aware of the Fernando Lopez incident. I'll take that video and I'll play it just now, and then so people will at least be aware of what we're talking about here. Because for me, that should have been the moment when the people with the power said, "Okay, the shit is hitting the fan here. We've tried a respect campaign. We've tried this and that, and they've all been completely ineffective." Society, well, I don't know if it's what it's like in Holland for you, but things seem to be getting a little bit more, everyone's more on edge, everyone's just getting more aggressive and a little bit more selfish. And like I said, I think that should have been the watershed moment where the referee's getting assaulted, or the potential for a referee to be seriously assaulted or killed should have been highlighted at that moment. But it was just kind of, everyone went, oh God, yeah, oh, that's bad. But then just carried on as normal.
Yeah.
It was very interesting, Johan, and it'd be great to hear Nathan's take on the mindset here. That video got sent to me privately and said, this video is in the hands of that FA, not the FA, that FA. And it looks like the time to keep it quiet. Please don't say it's come from me. Will you have a look at this video? So I looked at the video. I wonder if it's seen it. And as Antti said, it's going to be showing it. If you look, there's a person starts running across from left to right. Loads of people changing him. And then they all jump on him. And when I first seen it, I thought that was a player. And I went back to the lad who sent me the video and said, tell me that's not a referee. And he just put like emojis of crying. I went, oh my God, I'm going to go out. So I give it to the BBC and I give it to TalkSport. I went absolute viral. Now, in fairness to the FA, definitely got to praise them here. There wasn't an awful lot they could have done, because some of them were people who were watching the game who went on that pitch. But the chairman got banned for life from that club. Got a really heavy fine, the chairman did. No player did, because the way the angle was in the video, couldn't quite see. The FA did do an awful lot, in fairness. But I'm not sure if Mark Ives' hands were tied by people above. But that was a real chance, because if that referee had a body camera on, they would have been seen. Those people would have been seen. And the game would be different. Interesting.
In Holland, a club like that will be kicked out of the league.
Yeah.
Even if players aren't involved or anything, they are responsible. So they will be held accountable and they will be kicked out of the league immediately. Well,
it should have been a game changer. It wasn't. But I do think that the FA did have a real good go at doing that. But they should have realised, hang on, if you can even put this into Google, I called it the worst incidents of assault we've seen on British soil. And that went everywhere, all the papers ran with it. Because it was and it should have been a game changer. And we've got to be positive in what we do. And we know, we've all been doing it 20 odd years, some of us. It's a wonderful, wonderful hobby, refereeing. You make some great friendships like we've proven on this video. There's Jörg having over 20 years. There's actually having over 15 years. Hopefully we'll know Nathan as long as that, and he's still involved in refereeing. It's a wonderful one that we make some good friendships, we meet some great people, we go to some great places. But there is an increased opinion that there's more violence, like you said, Jörg, more incidents, which seems to be gradually escalating, and we're becoming a little bit desensitized to how people view a match official, that they are fair game. And I just think that's the bit that needs to change. But referee is a wonderful, wonderful hobby that I'd advise anyone to get involved in.
Well, when I think I mentioned it in the first episode, and I'll briefly touch on it again. The facts are very, very simple. Okay, I wrote the piece on racism for the Third Team blog, 3 or 4 weeks back. And in my research for that, I looked at the Kick It Out, the charity, discrimination charity, anti-discriminatory charity, which is for players, fans, everybody who's involved in the game. And their chair, Sanjay Bandari, he did a piece with CNN, and he basically said, he reeled off a load of statistics. And then the long and short of all of that is that we obviously had a referendum in this country in 2016 around leaving the European Union, and that was a decision that the country made to make that decision to leave the European Union. And since then, the statistics are clear. There's just no getting around it. That racism in society has gone up, and racism in football has gone up as a consequence. And I'm sure, maybe you won't, but I'm sure that the majority of you will agree that what happens on a football pitch is generally reflective of society. So we've seen assaults going up, we've seen racism going up, and people who are involved in football are members of society as well. And the way that society is reflected on a football pitch. And I think that the job of referees, as the responsible party in regards to the running of a football match, are the ones who are really feeling the brunt of this at the moment. I think all of these cases of racism, and it's not just racism, it's sexism, it's discrimination of all kinds, and a rise in assaults or contact with a match official, I think, is another title that's being used as well by the Football Association. I'm not familiar with all of the titles that are being used, but I know that the figures for these things are on the rise if you look, and that's a big problem for referees, because, as I say, particularly when we're on our own on a Sunday morning, and you've got, you guys will all know, you've been there, you've got people who are under the influence of alcohol still from the night before, or even the early hours of that morning. Drugs are another massive factor that are causing a big problem. And, these are all things that ultimately, when you hammer them all down, one thing, the crux of referee.
I agree. Have you seen a change here in Holland? Has it got worse? Has it, since that particular incident, which was a few years back, did it change the game?
Yeah, I think it did. Yeah, I think if I look back on games in the 80s when I was watching as a little kid, referees were manhandled and pushed around and sworn at. You hardly see that.
Sorry, guys, that's my wife coming back. That's Colin, my Shih Tzu, who punched the Rottweiler. And he'll go out there, he'll see my wife coming in, and he'll run back in there in a minute. So apologies.
I've done hundreds of games in Holland, and only twice have I been touched by a player. One of them resulted in a 2-year ban. And apart from that, I think, looking back on the way it was in the 80s, it's far better climate now for referees, far safer than it was back in those days. So I actually think if you're old like me and you look back on the way it was, that it has improved. But if you're young and new, you might experience it different. I think over here in Holland, I think it's fair to say there is a safe climate for referees in general. There are the odd clubs where it's dangerous, but the Dutch FA is doing everything they can to kick out those clubs. We'll have to be wary for teams going to court, so they have to make sure they follow every rule and then kick out the teams that have been attacking referees or whatever, or abandon games. If there's a team and your game's abandoned twice in a season, then you get kicked out if it's your fault. I think in general I've seen things improve, especially since that incident in 2012. Horrendous, of course. The only thing I'm slightly worried about, is this COVID thing. You think, what's that going to do with this? But every player, every referee as well, is keen to get out there. So these players are full with emotions and adrenaline to get out in those pitches. So I think these first games that we're going to see after COVID will be difficult ones for referees to manage. Players will be very, very excited to go out there with negative consequences as well.
I agree.
And we all do. We I think you mentioned that, Todd, didn't you? Almost word for word, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. No, I'm not repeating it. No, that's what I'm thinking. I'm slightly worried about what happens in these first games. And I think it's for the referees, for us, to clamp that down quickly.
Yeah.
I was going to say we'll be excited as much as the players will be as well.
Yeah.
And so I think with those two, like the players buzzing off their tits with adrenaline, and the referees buzzing off our tits with adrenaline. Those first few games are going to be so weird. Like it's like going to be almost Christmas morning, and we get to play with all our new toys, but they're toys that we played with before. So it's going to be mad like that. Don't get me wrong, I'm really looking forward to it. To getting back out there in whatever way, shape, or form that is. I do think though it's gonna take I'd say about a month to just fall back into a routine of getting used to whatever changes are being brought in, just to get the games going, but then also just to get back into the flow of refereeing, and also for the players to get back into the flow of playing. Their match sharpness, especially at the lower levels, isn't great at the best of times, but having what potentially will be a 6-month break by the time footballs get going again, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, it is. And we've got a photograph we put up. You might have seen it. It was a photographer who sent it into our Facebook page. He took this lovely photograph of a referee on his own before the game with a ball, and there's a rainbow.
Yeah.
And the rainbow is almost on his head. And he said, "What do you think?" I said, "Oh, that's lovely. You know, can we use that?" So I edited it, put his credit on there. Len Copeland. I don't give him credit. And then I'll put the hashtag love the whistle on there. And then on LinkedIn and Facebook this week I put up this, when it first got shown on our Facebook page, people were like, viewed it as, the solitude of being and all stuff like that. But now it's got a different dimension. It's a different dimension because we've all missed it so much.
Yeah.
And we just hope that rainbow just has got a little bit of a different meaning now, that at the end of that rainbow is going to be a lovely game of football, and that, hopefully we'll come back and the game will be a better game.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
I think that call would be a good time to stop one of the episodes.
I think it would. There'll be a nice...
I must get Colin on one day. I'll bring Colin up and show you Colin. He's a cracker little dog.
Did you see? Well, I sat in on. I don't know if you've heard of it. Keys to Referee. They've got this weekly Zoom chat like this, but they've got Keith Hackett, Mark Halsey, and Roger Dilks on it. And the reason that I do the live comedy broadcasts, and one of the things is anything can happen, and whatever will go wrong at some point will go wrong. And anyway, they get about 40 minutes into their live stream, and it's been moderately interesting up to that point. But Mark Halsey's dogs just like burst in and they're barking away, and they've got spotlight view turned onto their Zoom chat. So whoever's talking at the time, they take the full screen. You get to see them. So every time there's a bark, the screen flips to Mark Halsey, and he's there just going, "Oh, for fuck's sake!" I was watching it I just lost my shit. I was like, "This is brilliant. This is it's so funny." So yeah, it just reminded me of that when your dogs popped in. Just the little bark.
We had a spaniel called Rafa, named him after Rafa Benitez. He was a good man, and he passed away a couple of weeks ago. Not Rafa, the manager, Rafa, my dog.
Yeah.
Who we missed terribly, but he would be, every time my wife comes home, I think that's where Colin's got it from. He would go mad, and so I wouldn't be surprised if Colin makes a feature at some point in this.